Yeah, so today I wanted to talk about enablement. I was looking into this all day today. I was researching it. I was trying to figure out what is enablement. We've got Alex sitting on the call as well, and he's a sales enablement leader now. So, so I think it's a really interesting topic for today. Enablement, like the definition of it, is to give someone the authority and the means to actually do something. But what are sales enablement people doing today for us to help us to close more deals on the front line? So I was looking at a Salesforce survey, and 74% of sellers, they're saying that the jobs are becoming more consultative and less transactional, which is true. We all know that. But who's helping us to become more consultative? Who's helping us to be that seller, to amplify our ability? I mean, look, Joe can probably back me on this, right? Because he worked at Gartner with me in trenches. And I mean, I would see enablement people come in for the first part of onboarding, and that was it. Like, you meet these guys, then they just sit in their iron thrones and they pass messages from people to people to people to trainers to managers to VPs. A lot of that stuff gets lost in translation. Where is that strategy, and where are these guys when we need them, when we're on the front line? I didn't see much of that. I think most of my enablement came from my manager, my coach, my mentor. And actually, most of the time on the front line, I had to go and figure out who is the best mentor, who is going to teach me the tricks of the trade, the best practices, the stuff that I want to cling on to, the stuff that I want to use that's going to help me close more deals. Sometimes it's not my manager, it's not always the answer. So I looked into Harvard Business Review, and they're saying enablement in the best organizations, it's tasked with real capability building, not what we see today, not just people throwing strategy at millions of different EVPs and then trickles down into VPs and sales managers and different people and localized and changed all the time. Everything's lost in translation, and we just don't know what the hell we're doing. So I wanted to I wanted to go around the room and understand what the hell is enablement. What are we doing? Oh, by the way, the rules of the game. Rules of the game for everybody new. You got to put your hand up. Take a look at the positions. You can talk. So Tracy's already got hers up. So Tracy, go for it.
I think the thing that's coming up for me is, like, just really simply to ask the question, what enables sales? And I think we've tried to genericize this as a term so that people could say, like, there's one thing that every organization can do that will enable your salespeople. And I think that that's dangerous, because every single organization is selling something different in a different type of market with a different type of goal with different salespeople. And so I think this has to be a little more personal in how we look at what can we as a unique organization do to enable our salespeople, and what will that look like when they are enabled, so that we can tell whether or not this helped. Because there's lots of things. There's training, and there's systems, and there's communication, and there's lots of things, and different reps need different things. And if we're not really asking those questions about how do we enable this unique sales team, then I think we're creating a gap.
I think I'm inclined to agree with that, Tracy. We absolutely are. But if you've got an organization, it probably depends on the size of the organization. So now I'm going to use Gartner as an example. We've got something like 5,500 sales reps, right? 5,500 sales reps. You've got different EVPs looking after different regions, different product types, different challenges. That then trickles down into various other VPs and various other sales managers, and everything gets localized. So if you end up with one enablement global function, when they wake up in the morning, what should they be thinking about? Should they be thinking about ramp times? Should they be thinking about closing more deals? Should they be thinking about pipeline? Should they be thinking about conversion? How do we know
But
what's
what's
right?
the problem, right? Like, I feel like even when you're looking at that size of organization, your problem isn't necessarily the same as another large organization's problem. So, and now you're saying, okay, well, we have this specific structure. Okay, well, now what we're talking about is creating sales enablement within this specific structure. So there's different questions to ask than a small business that has 3 sales reps. Yeah, and it's more complex. Absolutely it is. But we can't pretend that something that works for an organization with 5,500 salespeople with 6 levels of management is the same for people who have 3 reps that cycle in every 18 months. Right? Problems aren't the same, the structures aren't the same, and your sales enablement strategy is based on your unique situation. I'm done.
Totally agree, Tracy. Let's move on to Sarah. Sarah, what do you think?
No, but I think that the question you posed is interesting, and I agree with Tracy because there are several levels to this in an organization. So the size you're talking about obviously becomes much more multifaceted because you need to enable individuals to teams to meeting different ICPs to up to your strategy. So if you are a head of sales enablement, you are supposed to jump into the structure and strategy that is already in place from top funnel all the way into sales organization, right? So if there's a challenge with figuring out what to focus on, then we have a challenge on a strategic level rather than a challenge when it comes to sales enablement because that's an enablement force, right? To enable us to do what our strategy is lining up for us to do. And if there is issues related to priorities, I think the challenge lies in the structure of how you run your business when it comes to sales rather than sales enablement in itself, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. I think what I'm facing on the front lines is, look, there's somebody that sits at the top, ahead of sales enablement for a huge organization or even a smaller or mid-sized organization, which is fine. And they've got all of the data, they've got all of the insight, and they know, look, this as an organization we need to fix. Fine. But how does that help me to sell more deals, which is by and large the definition of enablement? It's to help me and everybody else on the front line to actively close more deals. So how do we revamp this so it's not just one person sitting in a chair thinking, okay, this is a strategy and this is what the company needs to do, but we translate that and trickle that down to every single frontline rep? Maybe there's a way.
But then the question comes up that is, so is sales enablement supposed to be 2-3 people in a team addressing an entire organization like this, or should sales enablement be part of each team member? So we have one per team that actually has 20% of their time doing sales enablement down on the floor based on the structure that's been set in place, the strategy that's been set in place based on the people who are at the top of sales enablement, who then collab with marketing and sales like this. Because I think this is a challenge because we're putting someone in a position now. So you have the VP of sales enablement now, you're supposed to run the entire organizational drip down into the organization. The problem is that this happens on the ground in the meetings that the sales reps are doing. It's not something that you can have as a top guided steering engine, and we can create all the documents and tools, tech stacks and things like that as we want, but it's not going to actually help people that are 4 levels below you in the organization who might only get access to read this document and here's how we work with sales enablement. That's obviously not going to help. So I think we're trying to figure this out as we go because this is a pretty new function. But I think many sales team leads have had this type of part of their role ongoingly to provide material, to provide training, to provide ICP understanding, to provide these things. But now it's been stuck in the organization over here instead. And that causes some growth challenges, right?
Absolutely does, because who owns enablement then? Is it those 2 or 3 guys, or is it everybody's job? Is it my job to enable myself on the front lines?
Yes.
Is it my manager's job to enable everybody? Is it the VP? Who owns enablement? If we're all enablement people, then why do we need the 2 or 3 people at the top?
Yes. Strategy that I would answer to that, but yes.
Yeah, there you go. There are many reasons. Joe, you've had your hand up for a while, mate.
I know, guys. I've been keen to come off mute. Nice to meet everyone here. I think that the piece that you mentioned, Azim, around them almost being sat at the top and they're not really live on the ground. I've experienced sales enablement leaders that are really good at talking about the practicalities and the theory, and I have had sales enablement leaders who are actually there in the trenches with you, listening, constantly looking to engage with calls, and actually have a really good understanding and can really offer advice after you've onboarded. I've seen that at Multiverse, where I'm at now. Our sales enablement leader is exceptional. He's constantly on the floor with us, listening to calls, providing feedback, and he does a really great job of that. For me, enablement needs to be embedded across the whole business. So I think, you know, having the odd sales enablement leader can work, but I think if you haven't got enablement as a culture embedded across the various regional directors and managers that you have, then it's going to be really difficult for a sales organization to be successful. I think we saw that at Gartner. There's a range. Some managers or leaders had that enablement focus. Some of them probably didn't have the ability to offer great enablement, whereas in an organization where enablement is placed as a key focus in sales leadership, I think, yeah, it ultimately delivers better reps, better performance, and better outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. You can micro-focus enablement when you're working at Multifirst, right? But imagine micro-focusing enablement at Gartner. It just wouldn't have worked, right? So what you end up with, it is tough. And what you end up with is you have a team leader, a coach, a front, like the guy that leads from the front, right? Guy or girl that leads from the front. And we saw some really cool people at Gartner, but then we also saw some really bad people at Gartner that they were promoted just because they were good sales reps. They weren't good sales managers. It happens, right? And that's one of the facets that's broken in sales, because they don't know how to enable everybody else. They don't know how to make us better and extract what needs to be extracted from everybody's personal brand, everybody's personal selling style. Right, and that's the difficulty here, because who owns enablement? Because if you've got a company as big as Gartner and you end up with something like what Sarah's saying, a ton of strategy at the top, who actually owns the tactical delivery of that strategy? So who's enabling me?
Yeah, right? I see it as almost sort of top down and bottom up. You need to have that sort of focus of enablement from the top, but you also need to have it from the ground working up. So I think if you can get both married well, you know, Multiverse much smaller business than Gartner, but I think they've done a really good job of doing it. That's not to say that it couldn't be better, and I think AI could be a great way of making it better. Sorry, guys.
I think so. Absolutely. AI can jump into all of the little holes that we can't obviously jump into. So
but can I ask something, because I think this is interesting. Sorry to interrupt. I'm trying to figure out, because when I look at throughout my career, and I've been all IC roles you can be, like SDR, and I've booked meetings, and I've done the deals, and I've been AE and talking senior AE and all the things. And the only person that always enabled me was my team lead or my manager. Like, so why would this be moved now? So even if we have like a sales enablement crew working with delivering the really strategic, smart things that we need to have in place to help the managers manage us better by teaching us more things, why shouldn't that be on their to-do list, that this is part of your job now? Because it's always been part of their job. They haven't been doing it well at the base, but it's always been part of the gig, right? So in my head, the sales enablement over the top organization part should be about fully understanding the market movement and how we can address and have angles in our sales methodology out into the market, and then helping each individual leader to enable their team better. And since we have a challenge with even coaching sales reps, that's not happening enough, not even close. The problem is rather, what should that role be? Because we know that most people who have that role is ICs becoming a manager, right? They don't know how to lead. They don't have any onboarding really. And you get a phone and a computer, like, go manage a team now. This is not a great situation to put people in. But in my head, this should be on that level when it comes to enabling the ground people, like the ICs, right?
No, I'm inclined to agree. I think Joe put it quite well as well. You need top down and you need bottom up. But the problem is, right, when you keep promoting salespeople that are good at their job, they might have just lucked out in 4 or 5 opportunities and ended up becoming a sales manager. They have no clue how to enable. And you can give them as much enablement strategy as you like, unless they have an enable mindset, they are not going to enable us on front line. So how do we empower the managers and the team leaders to empower us? Because that, I think, in and of itself is going to have a profound effect. Jamie, you're next. I think you're eager to go, so come off mute, mate.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I agree. It's funny, I was having a conversation over the last couple of days. I was at a big performance marketing event in London, and I was talking to somebody who was a similar age to me, and we said, like, you know, when back in the day, you had a small training course of a couple of weeks, then you were given a phone book and a telephone, right? And just like that was the extent of, and I know I'm going back a few years, right? But that was in reality the support that you had. And now you look at the technologies involved. And so I think I agree with a lot of the points we made. I think if you're lucky, you're in an organization that's got a foundation of enablement, and it covers lots of different things. From an organizational point of view, you've got businesses that have got technology tools, collateral, like creative assets, analytics and reporting, and they talk a good game, but often the thing that gets left is you're then considered capable, so you're scaled, whether you're an SDR or a manager, or you're in obviously a frontline sales AE role, and once you're then deemed capable, that then just continues ad infinitum until something then happens. Either there's a strategic change, or there's a problem with your performance, or like that's when, okay, well then we'll start to, that's the catalyst for maybe making a change. And I think Joe, you made like lots of good points. Then it needs to be ingrained from both the top, and I don't know that, like going back to what you said about managers, I don't know that necessarily managers have all of those things at their disposal, because often that comes with a budget assigned to it, or an amount of money that needs to be spent. So I think managers have some of that at their disposal, but I think it has to be ingrained as part of the organization as a continual learning opportunity, and continual support mechanism across the business. But I think the number of companies that do that well is very much in the minority.
Absolutely. I think I want to go back to your point, Jamie, of, you know what, initially back in the days before Joe's time, before my time, right? You just have a Rolodex phone, you just go out there and you'd hunt. But I think the fundamental persona of a salesperson has changed, and that's been buyer-led. Buyers don't want that, you know, boiler room sort of movie style selling anymore, right? They don't want that. It's just not receptive. They want a consultant. They want somebody that really knows the market, really knows the industry, and really knows the cost. Trouble is, the majority of us are still stuck in our old ways, right? Even us, like the new generation of salespeople, are still stuck in some of those old ways. Right? You'd have blitz days. You'd make.
Yeah, so I was going to say, but like if I think back to my time as a sales manager over the last, so 2015, for about sort of 6 or 7 years, you know, I would have one-to-ones. I would, you know, meet with clients, with, you know, part of my team and that sort of thing. But I think as what the business had at that time was definitely less of the, if I had a tick list of all the things that enablement could involve, I think it might have 3 out of 10. Like it wasn't set up for that. So I think that was, they talked about enablement, and they talked about bringing SDRs on, and they talked about like training and giving support. But actually, if I look back on that, and I thought they did a good job, actually they were probably well short of that, you know.
Yeah, you know, I think absolutely. I think you're right. There's so much more that can be done. What's the solution though? That's the thing. We know what's broken. How do we move forward with this? How do we fix this? Leo, I know you've been waiting a little while, so
I think Alex is next. Hi everybody. Do you want to go with Alex? He's number 2.
You're number 1 on my screen.
Oh, there you go. It's got 3 on. Yeah, look. Hi everybody. I've worked in a time when you had 2 or 3 weeks off in a classroom before we even got to see a customer, and I've worked in mostly professional services, enterprise software sales, and then moved into channel over the last 10 years, and it's very different. But I'll give you a few points that have worked in the organizations where I've built this type of program. I've always put this type of coaching, which, look, I think for the younger generation, and I'm not patronizing, I'm being really respectful here and empathetic. We've talked about this, Azim, when you first introduced yourself to me. I think sales has become commoditized, right? I think there's an element of smart, good, aggressive people that are just they're given a limited amount of time of training and mentoring, and then they have a script, and then they either survive or they have to move on. And that's my impression, especially with SDRs, who are absolutely a very, very valuable part of the resource base in an organization. But to bring that continuity, and I think, Jamie, you mentioned it, how do you operationalize this? I've put it under learning and development, L&D. They're the specialists in training, communications, mentoring, right up to the CEO. They're the ones that produce the programs. You know, those 5-minute tickler trainings you can do on the tube or in the airport about, oh, we've got a new version of a platform coming out. What can it do for finance and accounting, back office processing? You can learn it on there. Then you do an examination. We've all done it, and it's just a way of the world. It's got really fast now. You want minimum viability in the product base, and you want an MVP of a salesperson, the bare minimum to get you the growth you need without waiting 2 or 3 years. You've got to do it in quarters. So I think the pressures have changed. So I'm just going through a list. Somebody said line manager. We're all involved in coaching, and we should all be open to coaching. So absolutely, you don't leave it to L&D, but they're the professionals. They produce great content. They've gone and surveyed good salespeople, analyze why people aren't succeeding, and work out if the organization has to change. And then I'm thinking about, I mentioned channel because that's an essential part of growing startups if that's what you're into. And I think there is a completely different type of enablement. So I don't think enablement is the right word, to be honest. I think enablement is altogether something very different. I think it's more external. Maybe it's just a choice of words, but I think anyway, come back to it. L&D is where it succeeds or it fails. Give it to the professionals, coach them, guide them with your professional sales experience, and I think you get a much better chance of succeeding.
So bring it from the top down, from L&D, let the pros do their work.
I think it's a horizontal. Forget your top down. I think, the CEO, the CRO, and the senior, the VPs of sales, the SVPs, this is where their professional humility needs to come into play to say, right, I don't know, sorry, you're the professional L&D for this company. You've got regional ones, EMEA, Asia Pac, US, South America. You lean on them and you respectfully go with them, but you help infuse their program with your best practice. Of course you do. It's one team. They're not sales guys. They probably come from a sales background and they know some stuff, but they are really good at producing a program. And I've done it. I've produced programs for the big move now in enablement for partners and even IBMs of this world is to enable them within the sales process for your product, to help them win deals faster and shorten sales cycles, to help them wrap round services around your product instance so they get 5x for that sale. So I just think we've got to go with the professionals respectfully. Everybody has a contribution to make, and then you go at 100 miles an hour or 100 kilometers an hour, depending where you are on this call in Europe. But I think you've got to lean on L&D, and it has to be, everybody has to respect it, and it needs sponsorship from the CRO.
And they need sort of data points and sort of input from everybody on a horizontal scale fed back into L&D.
Exactly. You do a 2-week team thing, 4 hours, you get your best salespeople, you analyze deals lost and all that sort of thing. And the L&D team should bring that to life. Real use cases, failures to succeed on a deal, and successes. So what does a success look like? Why didn't we get that deal with, Vodafone? Talk through the instance, and you cultivate that energy, because the big call to action now is you can't be taking people off the road for 2 weeks, or even the SDRs off for an hour, 2 hours too frequently. You've got to transform your capability and training while you perform. Transforming while performing. That's the name of the game. You can't disrupt your sales energy and your process with customers and pipeline creation by taking people off the road anymore. Times have changed, and that's just the way it is. I quite like it. I'm adaptable. And how many hours did I waste in places at great cost, stuck in a classroom in the Czech Republic or somewhere? I love Czech Republic, don't get me wrong, but you're always looking at your phone. You've got a customer complaint. You've got a partner that's cheesed off because professional services haven't delivered as you asked. So I just think it's an exciting topic, this, but for my money, I stick it under L&D because they're meant to be the professionals.
That's a fair point.
Leo, on that, sorry, Azim. What I heard though was that the CEO and the CRO need to provide L&D with that autonomy to go away and do it themselves.
Well, yeah, with my experience, that happens. It's not autonomy, Joe, as such. It's look, in small startups. I've worked for big corporates like TCS, $4 billion, but there was only me and 2 telephones and a colleague. And I built a 400 million ARR business over 5 years. but now I enjoy startup much better. I'm gonna have to find a plug. So what I'm saying is not choose your words right. And yes, you've got to give people authority and trust. And yeah, okay, a bit of autonomy, but you're not letting them die. You're gonna input as a salesperson. You're going to input as a CRO to make sure the strategy framework is in place, so nobody goes to the left or the right. They stay on track on message, and the CRO should finally sign that off if it's a big program. But you can do local programs. I used to do local programs, you know, in the DACH region for my partners who they're the same entity as Deloitte, but they're very different. Say, for example, and you tailor it to them because they have a very specific approach to the market compared to their UK colleagues. You think they have one brand, they don't. You know, PwC has 96 European entities. You can't train them all anyway. You've got to put your money where you're going to get the big bang for your buck. I'm talking channel now. But sales guys are the same. You've got to give them enough to get on with the job, and they learn then on the job. But you've all made the right point about their line manager. They have to be able to coach and mentor as well, because that's by the hour, by the day. It's a real skill, but unfortunately, it's not like times past when there was a bit more time baked into the place. We've got internet, we've got an urgency culture. You know, we've got macroeconomic and social political stuff going on that's really back front of mind with many people. It's a stressful time. So to cut through that noise, I would always trust my L&D colleagues implicitly. And if they don't quite deliver, I'll take the accountability for it because I know that they will next time.
No, it's a fair point. It's a fair point. Totally understand. I think the one thing I'm missing from everything you've said is how do we infuse L&D with real feedback from the ground? Because I think one thing that we miss in organizations is we have a lot of the high level conversations, and you'll get the CEO, you'll get the CRO, you'll get everybody's best practice, you'll feed it all into L&D. But who speaks to the SDR? Who asks the SDR about, okay, can you tell me from the last 2 weeks what's working well, what's not working well, and how can we help you?
Well, you've got feedback forum. You know, everybody should have their voice, whether they've been with the business 1 week and they're 23 years old or 1 week and they're 50-year-old. All right. So everybody has their voice. There should be natural loop of feedback to keep improving. Because let's face it, when you start on these things and you look back in 6 months' time, you smile and say, crikey, you know, do you remember? When I ran a business in Amsterdam years ago, I was doing everything on a whiteboard with my German partners and my French partners. But that's the technology, you know, the internet was crap. They didn't all have laptops. So you did it in a classroom, but you had to make it meaningful and punchy. And, you know, it was great cost to them to invest. And my time off the road as an MD. So feedback is important. And we've all done it where they say, please fill this form out when you've had training. Get it, you know, when people do Mind Shark on you know, at the airport or on the train, learning the new ways of the company, it should be a feedback loop in there. How did you find this? What would you change? What's missing? And then let L&D synthesize that and push out the next instance of that training program.
I think there could be a sentiment issue on the front line there as well, Leo. I'm just thinking, and Joe might back me up on this, or he might have a contrarian view, but we've been in the same company on the front lines. And the thing is, right, you've got 1,000,001 things in front of you. You've got to create pipeline, you've got to close pipeline, you've got to manage accounts, you've got to do renewals. Somebody throws a form at you saying, please help L&D. You're either going to ignore it, or you're going to rush it, or you're just like, okay, cool, I'll just give you 2 or 3 points and crack on. But I think we can improve.
You mandate training because everybody needs to learn, even the most senior people, and you put it and you ask 3 questions, not 30 questions. You know, what would you change? And just give me one idea. You keep it really. I get you. I absolutely get you. You get it because we're all trying to juggle so many things.
Yeah, but if you feel like it's giving you value too. So if I, as an SDR, would respond, yeah, I would like more of this, and then 3 weeks later, there's a session for this, then I would fill out the form. So this is all about the mental shift to a place where we're all learning here. So let's help the training programs to be as fitted as possible. So that comes back to what's in it for me, right?
Also, it probably comes back to the organization as well, because if you think about it, if I'm filling out a form and I get nothing back, the next time I'll fill out a form again, I'll get nothing back. The third time, I'm not filling out the form. I've had enough, right?
Can I just interject quick thing? If I know that I'm out of order now, but quick thing on the forums, because I was, my last role was VP enablement, right? So and I worked, as Leo says, I agree 100% working with L&D. Then the forums had a very funny twist in them that everybody responded, is the training helpful? It all depends how you formulate your question. Is the learning helpful? Yes. Would you attend again? Yes. Still, the trainings that we had before offered next to no results. And you can still give good feedback to L&D because the program was well put together. It was tailored right. It was timed right. A lot of good things happened. Still, the methodology didn't deliver virtually a lot to the group, right? So I think there is a bigger effort that needs to be done to transfer information ongoingly. Because personally, I don't agree with feedback forms. I think for learning specifically, there needs to be a continuous loop of information to the person that is responsible for representing revenue into these discussions, building the training ongoingly, and then of course ranking the sessions. That is, as Leo said, quite important. But you can't do. Given that salespeople don't have a lot of time, you won't get a lot into depth in what is not working. The most that you can, I think, the most that you can expect from feedback like that is a sort of a median ranking of how it went down, but not much more.
I think there are better ways to do things than feedback forms. I think I'm inclined to agree with you, George. I think that's probably something that, in the right way, the right tech can probably sort out for us. If we were to let technology do a lot of this stuff now, imagine a world where all calls are recorded. You've got unlimited sort of voice of the customer. You've got unlimited voice of your frontline sales rep. You don't even need a feedback form. We let AI go through tons and tons and tons of data and figure out and pick out exactly what's required to change, what's working, what's not. Maybe it'll work over time. I don't know. Maybe that's the answer. I don't know, but I mean, is it juice worth the squeeze? I guess that's the question. And Alex, I know you've had your hand up for a while, mate. Not forgot you. And another enablement leader that we've got on the call today. Welcome to the call. You want to come off mute, introduce yourself, and
Yeah.
jump in.
Yeah, no, I've had my hand up so long I forgot what I was going to say. No, I'm joking. Yeah, I'm a bit of a curate's egg when it comes to enablement, in that my role only has jurisdiction, if that's the right word, over the SDR function. So I don't have anything really to do with account executives, except when they inevitably ask me for help anyway. But the way we see the role here is it's not like a train. There's no sort of training and coaching really. It's more just sort of facilitating, letting the SDRs sort of get on with their job. Like we trust our people. We think, they know what they're doing, and so it's quite a different sort of style, I think, to most enablement and sales management sort of structures, in that like what I do is I make sure that they have enough quality leads. I make sure that all the platforms they use work. I look into platforms that would mean they have to do less admin and note taking and sort of margin stuff. So I found everything that everyone said really interesting. I think it was Sarah who said that, like, generally she got the sort of support she needed from her manager. Was that you, Sarah? Yeah. So that's partly also my role is my manager is just fiendishly busy at all times. So I act as like a sort of like his adjunct in a way. Like if people have something semi-important to moderately important, they just come directly to me because they know I'll answer them as soon as possible. And so it's like sort of fighting fires more than sort of setting out a strategy. I mean, there is a strategy being set out, there is a vision being set out, but we're building it from literally nothing. So I'm having to sort of make it up as I go along. But the result is that basically I'm not sort of telling them how to do their job. I'm just making sure that they're able to do their job as effectively as possible. Like my view of management, and this might be unpopular with many of you on the call who are managers, but my view of management is the best management is management that gives you the tools to do what you need to do and then stays the hell out of your way until something breaks. And so that's how I like to approach the role. That, and every now and then, I run the analysis, I check the numbers. If someone's doing particularly well, I'll sort of hit them with a damn son, 16 this month, bet you can hit 20, and just sort of I'm like the sort of the good cop almost to my manager's bad cop, you know what I mean? Because I was one of them and I'm not above them in any sense. I'm on the same pay grade. We're on the same level in the company. I just don't have to do any cold calling anymore, which frankly I was never very good at. And that's me, I guess. I don't know. Bit of an unstructured Friday afternoon rant, but I hope it makes some sense to somebody.
Yeah, it does. So can I ask you something? Because I've thought about this a lot, because I think it depends so much on what type of team you have, right? So the junior, the sales rep, the less the ability to do what you were talking about. So the managers, you're supposed to give them tools and then let them do their thing, get out of their way, right? But when you have an entire team that is very, very junior, you need to be on top of culture ongoingly as a manager. So I think one of the challenges here is with senior people, it's different. And sometimes that can be both good and bad because they can think they know what they're doing, but they're really not. So that's a tricky part. I think it depends on how mature the sales teams under your managers are. Does that make sense?
That is a very good point. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And actually, yes. So, because we've got people all over the world. So our German team, they've all been doing this for years, so they know what they're doing. The UK guys, they're new, so I did sort of shape them a bit as they started, and I did coach them to begin with, and I did sort of teach them best practice, and they'll still come to me and say, how do I do this in Salesforce? But the key thing I think in that process is I always show them how to do the thing. I don't do it for them.
You make sure they teach themselves.
And yeah, we've got the Spanish team. They're new. Language barrier is not a huge issue, to be honest. Just use lots of smiley faces to make sure nobody thinks I'm telling them off.
But that's another question, I think, too, because you were talking about so some teams are more mature, and I understand that. The other question is, I don't really try to teach them what to do when it comes to overarching strategy, because that comes from how we sell. But there is a lot of sales teams out there that are selling in a way that is not working anymore. And no one in the team, not even their manager, understand what they're doing wrong because they haven't moved yet to the modern way of pursuing a buyer's journey, right? So in some cases, it works very well because everyone actually knows what to do, what works. And in some companies, they are just traditional and they haven't been able to move. And if you don't take in people to sort of move them on scale, and that's also a question about sales enablement. How do we scale if sales enablement works like you do? Because you're a person with limited number of hours. How do we scale you into the organization? So it's not you they're asking for advice, they're talking to a bot that has all your responses that's in your head, or they have video libraries to go in and find how do you do the thing in Salesforce, or how do we scale it? That's another question. Sorry, I just took the conversation. I will shut up for a while.
No, you're right. Sorry.
Let the people who have hands up to,
it's exactly that. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Sharon's had her hand up for a long time. She disconnected and came back. So I'll move on to Sharon next. Thanks, and love your input there, Alex. I think the only question I would have is how good are your SDRs? And if they're so good that they know what they're doing, completely low touch, then sort of why do they even need enablement, right? There's always something that you can fix. There's always something that can be improved. You need to get, if you're in sales especially, you need to get 1% better every single day. That's the fight, that's the struggle, that's the strive. And that's what I think leaders or people in your position, Alex, should be supporting with. So fair play. You're definitely a good manager there. Sharon, over to you. And then
Thanks.
George and Leo, you still got your hands up. I don't know if you want to speak again.
Yeah, I want to. I
you wanna-
interjected before, but I want to
Yeah, that's
also have
I
a
was just
take
saying
on
in
that.
with you.
Yeah.
That's fine. Let's let Sharon jump in. You jump in next, George. Sharon.
Thanks, Azim. I mean, basically, I think everybody owns enablement. You know, it's a company-wide thing because we're all responsible. And even if you've got L&D teams who are responsible for sort of, you know, the organization and coordination, it still comes down to, I think, enhancing and refining all the skills that our teams have. I think that managers need to be trained as coaches. And I think that definitely is a gap, you know, sort of generally that's evident at this stage. Because they need to be coaching their managers. And I mean, as Leo said earlier, you know, you can't afford to take people out for long periods of time anymore. So the best way really is coaching them on the job, which obviously is where the AI bit, you know, comes into that, because it's going to be very practical. But for me, yeah, definitely coaching is absolutely critical. I mean, I came from a sales background, and I have to disagree with Alex actually. Because I know when you've got very, very experienced and mature salespeople, but you can't just leave them to get on with it and get out of their way, because this industry, all our industries, the whole world is changing. We need to be really agile and responsive, and you've got to adopt a learning sort of ethos. You can't sit still and say, well, okay, I've got those to that level of maturity. You have to keep on honing and refining and adapting those skills, you know, and there's so much industry knowledge. As you said in the beginning, we're not just salespeople, we are advisors, we're consultants. So you've got to have a broad knowledge, and that comes from constant research. You know, and if you want your salespeople focused on, then you've got to fill in those gaps by providing them with the data that they need. But that's really my take on it. Okay. Thanks.
No, it makes a ton of sense. And again, I think that feeds back into what Sarah was saying, right? There's a lot that we can do as humans, but how do we scale the human ability to continue to deliver in all the nooks and crannies that the human cannot be in, right? And that's where Velocity AI comes in. That's where we deploy humans, your brain replicated through AI, into the calls, into the areas where, you know, we can't have a human sales enablement leader, where we can't have a manager in the moment, in the context of what's going on. But yeah, very interesting, Sharon. I think, yeah, let's pass over to George in the interest of time, because we've got 15 minutes, and I am going to pick on you as well, Fred, because everybody wants to hear your voice, and you've not put your hand up yet. No, you go. No,
Typing loads of stuff, mate. Typing loads.
You're next. So, George.
Cool. So I just wanted to add my 2 cents to this. So for me, enablement comes down. First of all, enablement is the new customer success, right? It's the new word in the industry that means an entirely different thing depending on who you ask. I haven't met 2 enablement managers doing the exact same thing. There is no KPIs, there is no metrics. We don't measure the same stuff. Somebody is doing like what Alex is doing, so sort of actually enabling people, like taking obstacles out of their way and doing systems and how I work with Salesforce and a bit of training, and depending on maturity, right? It's very, very fluffy. It's a very fluffy role at the moment. For me, it comes down, and so if enablement means scaling and improving how the departments work, for me, it comes down to 3 things: culture, methodology, and tech. And culture has to do with organizing your teams in a way, or building a culture that encourages ongoing learning or learning new skills and improving that 1% every day, right? And that cannot only come top down. You need to create an environment where people want to learn new things. They seek knowledge out themselves from a variety of sources. Then it has to do with methodology and what you and Leo were on before. So how does this full ecosystem work? How do we measure? We talked about a lot of things, how we do things, but how do we know practically if training is working? How do we know practically that if you send the rep from a training session out on a call, how they perform? And even if you're sitting down with them, each enablement manager will look at different things, because we're not aligned as roles or as organizations. What are we actually measuring? And the last bit, the last bit of methodology has to do with technology. So how do you make sure that your operations scale? Yes, you have probably a couple of good coaches. Most organizations have a handful. Most managers are not good at coaching. They're good at measuring, they're good at instructing, but most managers are quite terrible at coaching, to be honest. Either because they haven't done the job themselves, or they haven't taken an education course, they're not pedagogical, they're very antagonistic, they're only appreciating competence that look like their own. And since there is no objective measurement for this, it's up to whoever to decide if the 16 calls that Alex said is a good job or not. 16 in compared to his colleagues might be good, but compared to the market that he's addressing might be quite low. I'm not trying to judge what he said, but it's very variable measurements. Everything sort of, a lot of times things come sort of to intangibles. It's not really defined, and things that you can't define and you can't measure, you can't improve. It's virtually impossible to do. We're looking at, okay, so sales went up, that means that training worked. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It might be that we bumped into 2 ready customers that they were ready to buy. There is methodology and there is technology out there. You talked about AI as in now, looking at data points. What are people actually doing? What feedback are they getting? And getting a framework together from experts in their field. And this is where I agree with Leo a lot. We leave L&D or we leave HR and people that actually know how to coach, that have the methodology on how to make people consume and adapt information. And we just send people along with the highest selling rep. I have been that person, and I can guarantee you the people that copied exactly what I've been doing, I haven't seen worse disasters in a meeting in my life, because this is the style that works for me, not for the next person, right? So to sum it up, culture, methodology that involves all departments, and technology, primarily to have data points to measure.
Do you know, I've got one question for you there, George. Thanks for the summary, and that's very interesting. But you mentioned it, you know, the 3 main things for enablement leaders are culture, methodology, and tech. Thing is, right, tech's moving at an unprecedented rate right now. AI, innovations, barrier to entry for tech is definitely making technology the sexy part of enablement. And I'm finding, because I end up now stumbling into so many enablement leaders, more than I care to mention, right? And it looks like they're becoming a procurement function for sales. They're forgetting about the culture, they're forgetting about the methodology, and all they care about now is what's the tech that we can bring in, what can we do? And we've got procurement for that. Why do you need enablement, right? So where are we losing the message here? What's going on?
And this is the safeguard for me. This is why I build I have methodology as part of the 3 things, because if you know what you want to look at, then methodology is only a medium, right? And I know this to be true because I spend so much time in sales meetings, and I've got so much spam. I'm not going to say outreach, because outreach, the way that it's done, is not outreach. But anyway, That's a topic for another time. Yes, it has become a lot. It has become a procurement function. It's the person, usually because they're more junior people. They're not used to being pitched stuff. So you go to you don't go to the CRO anymore. You will go to the enablement manager and say, so you were an individual contributor before, and a lot of people get actually quite happy to be approached for once, to be sold to. But technology can't help you if you don't have a problem to solve, if you don't implement it in a part of your process. And that's where we blame, because I sold technology for the longest of time. Technology can't help you if you don't have a method to put it on. If you don't have a plan, technology in itself can't do anything for you. And this is where a lot of people blame the tech. So yeah, we bought AI and it didn't solve our outbound efforts. It's like, yes, because you don't have ICPs in place. That is not the AI's problem. That's your problem. So no, technology can't solve anything in its own, but it can scale the things that Alex has been doing instead of, or I've been doing, watching recordings upon recordings upon recordings until my ears bled. This is what technology can do. It can give you data points. It can give you input where it's impossible to clone me or anybody else in here.
Yeah, it's the analysis part. It's making something analyze and go through all of the trenches of data that we have a million times faster than we can. Save you a ton of time. Absolutely agree there. Fred, let's hear your voice, mate.
George just said it. His last little bit is pretty much what I was going to say, along the lines of anyway. No, I mean, it's really interesting listening. You know, I'm a simple sales trader and I work with more traditional types of industries where they probably don't have sales enablement. So it's interesting for me to hear all this. But what I keep hearing on this balance between tech and human, tech and human, tech and human, you know, and the word coaching has come back into this. And I was sort of scribbling down here and I went, well, you know, we're talking about people here who are presumably talking to people. You know, the SDRs or AEs, or whoever they are talking to people. So there's a people thing going on. Now, there's then got to be some people thing going on there as well. And if we try and take all of that out, who's going to want to do that? I mean, do you want to be a manager that just runs a keyboard? Do you want to be a salesperson that doesn't speak to anybody? I mean, maybe that's where we're going, and that's a completely different thing. But for me, what I'm hearing is that while there are people doing jobs with people, we've then got to have that people element in there somewhere. And if it's taking the data to then make the coaching and stuff better, then, you know, that sounds like a good idea. And the other thing, my brain kept drifting to this evening, right? England are playing rugby tonight. Yeah, wrong game. They should be playing tomorrow. But I don't know if any of you ever watched elite sport like that, where the players on the pitch are the ones who have to deliver. They're like our salesperson, and they're getting a ton of input. Yeah, now they've got little like chips and stuff in their shirts and all that kind of stuff, and it's being data analyzed. But it's people who are putting that message into them, and they're communicating to them and getting their mindset right and doing all that sort of stuff. And when it's not working for a team and it's kind of not quite got right because the manager's not set them up correctly, it's the manager's got to go and be swapped. So again, I'm kind of hearing helping the managers to manage better stuff is another key area. So not really sure exactly what point I was making, who I was arguing for or against. But yeah, there's a place for all of it. But I think it's balance and how we're sensibly using that to actually enable, rather than, and that's why George nicked my big punchline, the tech ain't going to solve it just for being tech, you know? So.
Absolutely. It's a human game that we play, right? It's a human to human interaction that we have to deliver. The problem is, right, if right now you see some good sales reps and you see some reps that honestly I don't know, I wouldn't put them in front of any other human being. Right? Some people just, the sales are not right for you. You see probably like 10% of the industry where, you know, it's just a bad fit. 80% of the organization is what you call the moving middle. These are people that want to get 1% better every single day. They just don't know how. And I think tech plays a really cool role there, Fred, because, you know, that rugby game that you're mentioning where you have that chip in your shirt, that's, I think, what the industry needs. They need that chip in their shirt that gives them that input in real time to say, look, build a relationship better this way, do something different, try this, try that.
Yeah, because to be fair,
Michael,
to use that analogy, the coaches can call the player off when they know the player is knackered. The player doesn't say, "Oh, I'm knackered. I need to stop now." They'll carry on. They'll carry on. They'll carry on. But they've got the data that says, "No, you're not right."
I have a question on this. The chip. I'm sorry. I have to. So let's say that we build the chip then. So AI is the chip. So the chip then can communicate through online and phone and stuff. What do we need the salespeople for? And we keep ending up here, especially when it comes to everything that isn't enterprise. And I really think we should have this as a topic. So how long will it take before the chip is just a chip who interacts with people online for all that are SMB? Because in my mind, when I'm listening to this, I can't help but go there every time. Maybe it's just me.
No, it's not. It's not just you. I think it's a deeper conversation to be had. I think it's a conversation around what does your buyer want? Do they want a human? Because if they want a human, then you put a chip in a shirt. But if they want a robot, which I don't think they do,
I think they want a robot if it's more efficient to them.
I don't know. I think I personally think they still want to point a finger at someone and say, "Look, you sold me this for 200K, and I blame you, and you're next gonna roll." I think there's definitely a little bit of buyer remorse.
Can I just add, like if you're looking at this from a customer experience perspective, right? So farther down the line of sales, like I was dealing with a chatbot on the end, and it won't let me ask a question, right? It only has pre-programmed questions I'm allowed to ask. So I can't ask my question. So now we've disempowered the buyer. Like I'm the buyer. I was the buyer. I went through the sales process, bought the thing, and now I can't communicate with somebody about what I need fixed. And so if we extrapolate that from a sales perspective, if we expect to roboticize these things, all we're going to be doing is basing that on information we already know, which is what AI is doing too, right? It's using models that say, we know this, so let's incorporate that into our future learnings. How do we take into consideration that our buyer might be thinking something that's different than what we're thinking? And there's a lot of companies I experience as well who think they're selling something, and what the buyer is buying is different, and not completely, but slightly, right? I'm buying a solution to my problem. You're selling me a technology. It's not exactly the same thing. And so I think that to me, this all comes back to like conversation and curiosity instead of just saying like, okay, we know better, either from a sales training perspective or from a sales rep for a buyer perspective, and getting curious and listening and helping that influence our training, our enablement, our customer experience, and all that jazz. Okay, I'm done.
No, thanks, Tracy. No, made a ton of sense. Leo, I'm just reading your message. The house rules for this forum. So we record it. There are certain snippets that I use for public broadcast. I don't broadcast absolutely everything on the call all of the time. So don't be leaving us any, really sort of sensitive nuggets to do with your entire sort of company and bringing in your playbooks and all of that sort of stuff. It's supposed to be a high level discussion about the biggest problems in sales, the bottlenecks, and how technology can be used to fix it. I hope that makes sense, Leo.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I just didn't know. I missed last week. No, I just want to touch as well. I've just written it there before we drop. 3 or 4 people touched on this. It's got to be about business outcomes. The KPIs must link to those, ticking the boxes and all that stuff. The other thing is people of the younger generations now, and again, I'm not humoring them, you or us. I wish I was a bit younger, but my kids' age, they don't have time for sitting in a classroom for 6 hours learning sales processes and elevator pitches. They all go through this. They got attention spans of 15-20 minutes, stop. Time ago you do 2-hour sessions, have a break, 2-hour sessions. It doesn't work anymore. Let's not fight against new norms and changes. Let's embrace that. I have to reinvent myself every quarter. And if we don't fight that, then you do bring all that, you do get feedback. You don't ask people to write big form feedbacks. You give them what they want, and don't try and push water above hill, because the job is tough enough. Give them how they want it, when they want it, in a style they can understand, and a style that actually doesn't give them more pressure or stress, because they got a stressful enough job every hour of their working day. I've got to go for the rugby too. I wish it was Ireland, but I will hope I haven't upset you, Fred, but I will see you the other end. This has been great, by the way. I wish you all well.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for joining.